Uh,
Okay, now you can pause the recording.
okay.
Okay, you pause the recording. Whenever you're going to start, you just get to see. Maybe you can start with invocation or whatever. Yeah?
Okay, bro. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I'll be listening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So we'll start with the invocation. Om Jnana Timrandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Udapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vidam Stamsa Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपति गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय so is my slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the title of today's topic is Param Satyam, Supreme Absolute Truth. First of all, we'll look at what is meant by relative truth, because in the material world, we are always surrounded by relative truths, like our life revolves around going after these relative truths. So we'll just look at some examples of it. Like here, these are the tallest buildings in the world as of the year 2015. So our much quoted Petronas Twin Towers, which used to be the tallest building in the late 90s until 2004. So it's now lagging behind. So, however, in 2022, this was the latest list. So here we can see that this Merdeka Tower is now the second tallest. However, the current reigning champion remains undefeated. So we can clearly see that in just a matter of 7 years, so much have changed. Those buildings which used to be the tallest are now not so tall anymore. And even tomorrow, if some other building is built, like maybe for 900 meters tall, so that will become the tallest building, because all these are relative. But even now, there might be in some countries, they might be planning to construct the next tallest building to defeat the current reigning champion. However, it's all quite amusing when we talk about all these relative truths. These are really amusing because, as we know, I guess we all know about this building. This was also, it used to be one of the tallest, but all it takes is just a bunch of misguided youths to hijack a plane, and everything will be reduced to rubble in no time. So this shows the fragility and transience of relative truths in the material world. Our condition is so fallen in this material world because we are always running after all these relative truths forgetting the absolute truth, which always remains unchanged eternally. So that's why in Gita 8.15, Krishna aptly called this material world as Dukalayam Ashashwatam. In 8.15, Krishna says, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So, in order to transcend these relative truths, we need to focus on the absolute truth. And even if we look at history, especially in Bharat, there are many so-called sadhus or yogis who were active in politics. They, however, they were all only focused on relative truths. Very few original sadhus or yogis like even our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, only they were successful in attaining the absolute truth. And therefore, it's best for us to follow their path to get out of this Dukkalayam Ashashwatam. So first, we'll start by looking at what is meant by absolute truth. However, in this session, as we shall see later, absolute truth, it's quite a wide topic, but the main focus of this topic is on supreme absolute truth, the topmost. And we shall see why Krishna is regarded as the supreme personality of Godhead or the supreme absolute truth. In this session, we'll cover all the details from authorized scriptures on why Krishna is regarded as the supreme absolute truth. It's not out of a blind belief, but there are enough scriptural evidences, Shastric pramans, to prove why Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. So in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita itself, in Bhagavad Gita as it is, we are all very fortunate to have come in the association with the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, especially through ISKCON, because Srila Prabhupada has given so much for the Kali Jivas. We know that normally in our community, people are more interested about with learning about Sanatana Dharma by watching serials and reading WhatsApp forwards, but there's always this aversion towards scrutinizingly studying the scriptures. So in scriptures like Gita, we know that in Gita there are 700 verses, and then in Bhagavatam there are 18,000 verses. However, well, it can be said that those who do not study the Gita and Bhagavatam are very unfortunate. But even more unfortunate souls are those who don't even study the introduction to Gita and the introduction to Bhagavatam written by Srila Prabhupada. Because even by studying the introduction to Gita and also the introduction to Bhagavatam, those are actually as good as studying the entire scriptures also. Because Srila even like the Bhagavatam itself is regarded as the cream of the Vedic literatures. Like Vyasadev compiled the entire Vedic literature into 4 parts. He divided it into 4 parts, and then he wrote the Vedanta Sutra to summarize the entire essence, and then he composed Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the cream of the cream. But due to Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, which also has a 30-page introduction to it. Similarly, even for Gita, we have the about 30 pages of intro. These are also as good as studying the entire Gita and Bhagavatam. So those who don't even those who don't study the entire Gita or Bhagavatam, they are very unfortunate souls. But even those who don't get to study the intros written by Srila Prabhupada, they are even more unfortunate, because at least even by studying those introductions, we can get a lot of info from that. So even here for this topic, we'll see how Prabhupada has given so many details related to just one topic regarding the absolute truth. So from the introduction to Gita, there's a section where Prabhupada talks about the features of the absolute truth. Whenever we talk about absolute truth, the immediately our focus will always come to these three features of absolute truth. So Prabhupada has written, it's also explained in the Gita that impersonal Brahman is also subordinate to the complete Supreme Person, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. In chapter 14, verse 27, Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham, meaning Krishna says that the impersonal Brahman is originates from him. Brahman is more explicitly explained in the Brahma Sutra to be like the rays of the sunshine. The impersonal Brahman is the shining rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if we, as we can see from the cover page of the Bhagavatam, first canto maybe, so there we can see the picture of Goloka Vrindavan with its effulgence lighting the entire spiritual sky. So that is the impersonal Brahman effulgence, which originates from Krishna. The impersonal Brahman is the shining rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman is incomplete realization of the absolute whole. So, and so also is the conception of Paramatma. In the 15th chapter, it shall be seen that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Purushottama, is above both impersonal Brahman and the partial realization of Paramatma. So normally when we talk about absolute truth, there are three features involved: impersonal Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan realization. So it has been established in authorized scriptures that Bhagavan realization is the topmost or the complete realization of the absolute truth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Satchidananda Vigraha. The Brahma Samhita begins in this way: Ishvara Param Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Govinda, Krishna, is the cause of all causes. He is the primal cause, and he is the very form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So, as mentioned earlier, there are three features of the absolute truth: impersonal Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And all these three features, they also correspond to the three features of Satchidananda Vigraha. When you sorry, Mataji, please mute.
Dinesh, you can mute for them.
Oh. Okay, so the impersonal Brahman realization corresponds to the Sat feature or eternity feature of Satchidananda Vigraha. Paramatma realization corresponds to Sat Chit. So meaning it's Paramatma realization is wider than impersonal Brahman realization, but Bhagavan realization is the complete realization because it includes all the features of Satchidananda Vigraha, where we actually realize Bhagavan as the personality of Godhead in his complete Vigraha form. So Prabhupada also continues to establish how the people from different schools view the same thing. View the absolute truth based on the different aspects or the different features. People with less intelligence consider the Supreme Truth to be impersonal, but he is a transcendental person. As we are all individual living beings and have our individuality, the Supreme Absolute Truth is also in the ultimate issue a person, and realization of the personality of Godhead is realization of all of the transcendental features in his complete form. The complete whole is not formless. If he is formless or if he is less than any other thing, then he cannot be the complete whole. The complete whole must have everything within our experience and beyond our experience, otherwise it cannot be complete. So in addition to the realization of a Bhagavan realization, it will only be complete when we realize that the Supreme Person is a person with a form. So as we shall see later, even in some other verses of the Gita, in the purports, Prabhupada has given very clear examples of how this can be, of how the notion of personality of Godhead is completely justified. And then also in Srimad Bhagavatam, the intro to Srimad Bhagavatam, there are about 30 pages. Even in this intro also, Prabhupada has given a lot of important details regarding the absolute truth. Like the conception of God and the conception of absolute truth are not on the same level. Normally, there's this huge misconception regarding Sanatana Dharma, where we are often regarded as a polytheistic religion, where we worship many gods. Well, it's okay when others come up with all these propaganda, but even some of the people, even our Sanatani brothers and sisters, they also have this misconception, because the absolute truth is only one. Here, Prabhupada clearly gives the difference. The Srimad Bhagavatam hits on the target of the absolute truth. The conception of God indicates the controller, whereas the conception of the absolute truth indicates the summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energies. So, though it appears like there are many gods, it doesn't mean that we pray to those gods who have some controlling powers. Our focus should be on the absolute truth, who is the topmost, like in democratic governments. Normally we have a prime minister who is the chief of the cabinet, with many other ministers working under him. So it's not very, though we can also approach the certain ministries to get certain things done, but sometimes if we get the prime minister to agree to our proposal also, that is even much easier. So based on the same analogy, our focus should always be on the absolute truth, and not on all the individual gods who have their own portfolios. However, it should be noted that focusing on the absolute truth does not mean disrespect to the other gods or devatas, because all are parts and parcels of the absolute truth. There's no difference of opinion about the personal feature of God as the controller, because a controller cannot be impersonal. Of course, modern government, especially democratic government, is impersonal to some extent, but ultimately the chief executive head is a person, and the impersonal feature of government is subordinate to the personal feature. So without a doubt, whenever we refer to control over others, we must admit the existence of a personal feature. So Prabhupada has given a lot of examples and analogies to establish why the absolute truth must be a person, and therefore justifying the notion of supreme personality of Godhead. Because there are different controllers for different managerial positions, there may be many small gods. All the devatas derive their power from the supreme absolute truth. According to the Bhagavad Gita, any controller who has some specific extraordinary power is called a Vibhutimat Sattva, or controller empowered by the Lord. There are many Vibhutimat Sattvas, controllers or gods with various specific powers, but the absolute truth is one without a second. This Srimad Bhagavatam designates the absolute truth, or the summum bonum, as the Param Satyam. So Prabhupada has clearly established the difference between God and the supreme absolute truth. That's why the Srimad Bhagavatam also starts, the first verse itself starts with by focusing on the supreme absolute truth. Satyam Param Dhimai. The verse ends with Satyam Param Dhimai. The author of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, first offers his respectful obeisances to the Param Satyam, absolute truth. And because the Param Satyam is the ultimate source of all energies, the Param Satyam is the supreme person. the gods or controllers are undoubtedly persons, but the Param Satyam, from whom the gods derive powers of control, is the supreme person. The Sanskrit word Ishvara, controller, conveys the import of God, but the supreme person is called Parama Ishvara or Supreme Ishvara. So all the devatas, though they are controllers, having their own portfolios, the supreme person is Parama Ishvara. He does not derive any power from any other source. The supreme person does not derive powers from any other source, but he himself is the source of all powers. In the Vedic literatures, Brahma is described as the supreme god or the head of all other gods like Indra, Chandra, and Varuna. But the Srimad Bhagavatam confirms that even Brahma is not independent as far as his power and knowledge are concerned. So this is stated in the first verse of Bhagavatam. He received knowledge in the form of Vedas from the supreme person who resides within the heart of every living being, knows everything directly and indirectly. The words Janmadi Asya suggest that the source of all production, maintenance, or destruction is the same supreme conscious person. So regarding this supreme consciousness, in Gita also there's a chapter on, it's chapter 13, regarding Kshetrajna, meaning the knower of the field. So in that chapter also we saw that how the Paramatma residing in the heart of all living entities, he knows what is going on in the heart of all other living entities. If we look at the Jivatmas, every Jivatma only knows about what's going on within himself, about himself only, but the Paramatma knows about all other living entities. Consequently, the perfect personality is addressed in the Srimad Bhagavatam as Vasudeva. So, as we know, the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam begins with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Srila Vyasadeva himself pays obeisances to Vasudeva, who is Krishna, the Supreme Absolute Truth, which has been established in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So now we'll see the three different features of Absolute Truth in great detail. As we saw earlier, there are three features for realization of the Absolute Truth: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Please note this illustration of the sun's analogy. Explanation regarding this sun analogy is given in the purport for Bhagavad Gita 2.2, where Prabhupada starts to explain the meaning of Bhagavan. And also in that purport, Prabhupada even quotes this verse from Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 2, verse 11. Vadanti tat tatvavidas tatvam yat jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagavan iti sabdyate. So the absolute truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, stated in Bhagavatam. But in Gita, verse 2.2, in the purport, as we know, Krishna starts to talk for the first time in the Gita in verse 2.2, where it starts with Sri Bhagavan Vacha. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains the meaning of Bhagavan. The purport, there are two sections of the purport. In the first half, Prabhupada talks about the three features of Bhagavan, of the realization of absolute truth, followed by the explanation regarding Bhagavan based on the 6 opulences. So in the first part, Prabhupada explains that the three features can be compared to this sun's analogy. For example, the Brahman realization is equated to the sunshine of the sun. One who studies the sunshine only is the preliminary student. Ordinary students who are satisfied by simply understanding the sunshine, its universal pervasiveness, and the glaring effulgence of its impersonal nature may be compared to those who can realize only the Brahman feature of the absolute truth. So the sunshine, the effulgence of the sun rays, can be compared to the impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence which originates from Krishna's transcendental body in Goloka Vrindavan, which also illuminates the entire spiritual sky. However, that illumination is not actually, the material world is hidden from that illumination. That's why we are trapped in darkness. Then the next feature, the Paramatma feature, is compared to the sun's surface. One who understands the sun's surface is further advanced. The student who has advanced still further can know the sun disk, which is compared to knowledge of the Paramatma feature of the absolute truth. So compared to impersonal Brahman realization, Paramatma realization is slightly more advanced, but still it's not enough. Regarding Bhagavan realization, Prabhupada compares it to the sun planet itself. One who can enter into the sun planet is the highest. And the student who can enter into the heart of the sun planet is compared to those who realize the personal features of the Supreme Absolute Truth. That is the Bhagavan feature. Therefore, the Bhaktas or the Transcendentalists who have realized the Bhagavan feature of the Absolute Truth are the topmost Transcendentalists, although all students who are engaged in the study of the Absolute Truth are engaged in the same subject matter. The sunshine, sun disk, and the inner affairs of the sun planet cannot be separated from one another, and yet the students of the three different phases are not in the same category. So if we look at this illustration, all three pictures referring to the three features, they actually represent the same thing, the sun. But we can see that every feature looks at the sun from a different angle, but they are only looking at the same thing. Therefore, people from different schools look at the same thing differently. However, the Bhagavan realization is the topmost and complete one. So those impersonalists who study about impersonal Brahman realization, they are preliminary students. Then Dhyana yogis who are focused on meditation to discover the Paramatma feature, they are slightly advanced. However, the devotees who realize the Bhagavan feature of the Supreme Absolute Truth or Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, have the complete realization of the Absolute Truth. And regarding this verse from Bhagavatam, which states about the three features, learned transcendentalists who know the Absolute Truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. In the purport for 1.2.11 also, the same analogy is used regarding the sun's analogy, but some further explanation is given. The Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan features are qualitatively one and the same. However, the Bhagavan feature is the most complete one. Less intelligent students argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the Absolute Truth know well that the above three features of the one Absolute Truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. So even from these three schools, all the three schools talk about the same thing, however, at different levels from different angles. But still, it has been established from authorized scriptures that the Bhagavan realization is the complete and topmost realization. As it's explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of Bhagavatam, in the first verse of Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. So this is what sets apart the supreme absolute truth from the relative truths in the material world. We in the material world, we are surrounded by relative truths, and we spend all our lives to trying to go after all these relative truths, like the tallest building, the wealthiest man, the richest man in Malaysia, the richest man in the world. So we waste our life by focusing on all those relative truths. But in the spiritual world, there's only absolute truth. So the only way to get out of this vicious cycle of this miserable cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease is by looking out of this material world to the spiritual world to discover the absolute truth. And even that is not enough. We have to focus on the supreme absolute truth. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Like we saw regard the analogy regarding the tallest buildings. So those are material things which get reduced to rubble in no time. Still, we take so much pride in such achievements, so-called achievements. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. So even in this material world, we are known as conditioned souls. Actually, we are meant to be part of the Bhagavan's superior spiritual energy. However, we are since we are conditioned souls, we are being puppets in the hands of the material energy. So there's always this tug of war where we are meant to be part and parcel of Bhagavan in the spiritual world. However, due to our material desires, we are trapped in the material world because of the power of the inferior material energy, which is also part of Bhagavan's energy, as we shall see later. In the Gita also, there are quite a lot of verses which deal with the three features, the Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan realization. In 14.26, stated, Krishna says, Mamsiyo Vibhijanena Bhakti Yogena Sevati Sagunan Samati Jaitan Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpati. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So we know that from most of our previous sessions, we saw how this material energy, especially the three modes of material nature, dominate our lives as conditioned souls, because due to being embodied souls, we are trapped in this material body, and the three modes of material nature dominate us fully to the point where we completely forget about Bhagavan. And because of that, we are trapped in the vicious cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. However, we also saw the importance of transcending the modes to achieve transcendence, and by doing so, we can come to the level of Brahman. Though there are many different yoga systems like Dhyana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga is specifically recommended by Krishna to transcend the modes and come to the level of Brahman. However, it should be noted that the level of Brahman realization is only a starting point. It is not actually a bad thing, this Brahman realization. It's not that those who talk about Brahman realization, it's not that we should not say that they know nothing, things like that. It is actually a starting point of the realization of absolute truth. However, by following Bhakti Yoga, we can actually attain the complete Bhagavan realization without wasting time with the Brahman or Paramatma realization. Then in the next verse, also Krishna says, Brahmanovi Pratishtham, and I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So Krishna clearly says that he is the source of the impersonal Brahman. So Brahman realization is merely a starting point. And therefore, as we shall see later, it is the subset of Bhagavan realization. Then in chapter 18 also, starting from verse 50, there is a progression regarding these three features of realization of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, where Krishna progressively explains the three features in terms of confidential knowledge, more confidential knowledge, and most confidential knowledge. As we know in 18.40, from 18.40 to 18.44, Krishna explains about the Varna system, the qualities associated with each Varna, and he also talks about why it's important for us to be engaged in occupations related to our Varna. And from 18.45, he talks about how we can attain perfection by focusing on our occupation uh, in in the uh, in the spirit of bhakti, with a bhakti mindset to perform our occupation from 18.45 to 18.49. And then in 18.15, he starts to explain the confidential knowledge which begins with the Brahman realization. In 18.50, he says, "O son of Kunti, learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection." So up to this point, he has been explaining how one can attain perfection by performing one's own occupation. Then he explains how to transcend all the modes and move towards Brahman realization. So learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection can attain to the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. Then in 18.54, Krishna specifically says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, one who is thus transcendently situated at once, realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. So Brahman realization is a good starting point where we begin to realize and begin to attain full devotional service. However, by focusing on Bhagavan realization, we can actually speed up the process. And as Kali Jivas, it is very important for us to speed up the process. Though the progression happens gradually, however, we know that we don't have much time. Then in 18.55 also, Krishna continues to say that Bhaktya mam avjanati yavan yaschasmi tatvata tato mam tatvato nyatva visite tat anantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So it should be noted that in 18.55, Krishna says, enter into the kingdom of God. He doesn't say enter into myself or merge into myself, like what the impersonalists say. Then in the purport for 18.55 also, Srila Prabhupada has given a very beautiful explanation and analogy regarding why Bhagavan realization, especially realization of Bhagavan as the personality of Godhead, is important. He also highlights the problems with the impersonal Brahman realization. One who is fully conversant with the Krishna signs becomes eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom, the abode of Krishna. Becoming Brahman does not mean that one loses his identity. When we talk about Brahman realization and impersonal Brahman merging with the Supreme, the Jivatma, it is stated like the Jivatma loses his original individual identity to merge with the Supreme. However, in Bhagavan realization, which actually refers to the personality of Godhead, we do not actually merge into Bhagavan. We enter into the kingdom of Bhagavan to serve him in our individual capacity still. Liberation involves getting free from the conception of material life in spiritual life. The same individuality is there, but in pure Krishna consciousness. So even after attaining Goloka Vrindavan, we will still remain in our individual identity to serve the Supreme Person. One should not mistakenly think that the word Vishate means enter into me. It does not support the monist theory of entering into Krishna. It means entering into the kingdom of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. So Vishate means one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in one's individuality to render service unto him. So here Prabhupada has also given very nice example to explain the analogy. For instance, a green bird enters the green tree not to become one with the tree, but to enjoy the fruits of the tree. So suppose in a forest, if there are many green trees, like one next to each other. So there'll be like a huge canopy. We can only see the green trees all over. And when we see green birds entering into the tree, it might seem like the green birds have merged into the tree, but it's not so. The green birds still remain as individuals. Impersonalists generally give the example of a river flowing into the ocean and merging. So here also, Prabhupada tries to counter the argument of impersonalists using their own analogy. This may be a source of happiness for the impersonalist, but the personalist keeps his personal individuality like an aquatic in the ocean. So the impersonalist says that the impersonal Brahman realization is like merging into the Brahman, means like a river merging into the ocean. However, Prabhupada uses the personalist analogy, which is equal to individual souls are like aquatics which enter into the ocean. We find so many living entities within the ocean if we go deep. Surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. One must have complete knowledge of the aquatics living in the ocean depths. So if we use the same ocean analogy given by the impersonalist, in the personalist notion, we as Jivatmas, we are like aquatics entering into the ocean, which is the kingdom of the Supreme Person. Prabhupada also adds that surface acquaintance is never sufficient. Even if we look back at the sun's analogy, we can see that the impersonal Brahman realization actually deals with the sun rays. And then the Paramatma realization also deals with the sun's surface, with the sun's disk. So that is never sufficient. We should always focus on the topmost and complete feature, which is the Bhagavan realization. Then, so we saw that from 18.50, 54 and 55, the explanation was regarding the Brahman realization. Slowly, there is a progression from the confidential knowledge of Brahman realization to the more confidential knowledge. In 18.61, Krishna says, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hriddeshe Junajishati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Udani Maya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. So this clearly refers to the Paramatma feature of the Absolute Truth. So at this point, this Paramatma realization is regarded as more confidential knowledge, as mentioned by Krishna himself in 18.63. In 18.63, Krishna says, Guyat Guyataram. Thus, I have explained to you knowledge still more confidential. So the Paramatma realization is described as more confidential knowledge. So it's worth noting here that in 18.63, after speaking for 17 chapters, after explaining so much to Arjuna, Krishna says, deliberate on this fully and then do what you wish to do. However, Krishna does not simply leave Arjuna at that. He still wants to convince Arjuna further so that he makes the right decision. So in 18.64, Krishna says that he is going to reveal the most confidential knowledge, which is related to Bhagavan realization. Sarva Guyatamam Bhuya. Because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. So we saw the progression starting from confidential knowledge, Brahman realization, then more confidential knowledge, Paramatma realization, and now it's regarding the most confidential knowledge, Bhagavan realization. In 18.65, Krishna says, Manmana Bhava Mat Bhakto, Manjaji Mam Namaskuru, Mami Vaisadi Satyamte, Pratijani Prayosimi. Always think of me, become my devotee. So only devotees realize the Bhagavan realization, the complete and topmost feature of the absolute truth. So Krishna himself in the Gita, apart from many other pramas in various other scriptures, in Gita also, Krishna himself establishes the progression from confidential, more confidential to most confidential knowledge. So Krishna himself establishes that Bhagavan realization is the most confidential knowledge which can only be realized by devotees. Therefore, he says, Bhava Mat Bhakto. So, based on all the explanations, we can conclude that Bhagavan realization is the superset of all the others, rather than starting from Brahman realization and then progressing to Paramatma and then to Bhagavan. Through devotional service, we can realize the topmost and complete feature, which is Bhagavan realization, which also includes all other features. So, being Kali Jivas, it is very important for us to focus on all these easy and simple ways which have been revealed in the scriptures and also by all our merciful acharyas who have predicted that we as Kali Jivas will be struggling in this age. Therefore, they have laid out all these easy ways for us to achieve the supreme absolute truth. Now, regarding the energies of the supreme absolute truth, there are three types of energies of the supreme absolute truth: the superior spiritual energy, marginal energy, and the inferior material energy. These are the three types of energies. So when you look at the superior spiritual energy, there are three features of Krishna's spiritual energy. The three features are Santini, Samvid, and Hladini features, which also correspond to the Satchit Ananda features. Santini energy corresponds to the Sat feature, Samvid corresponds to Chit, and Hladini corresponds to the Ananda feature. Next, in Gita, it's also stated regarding the marginal energy and the inferior energy. In 7.5, as mentioned earlier, we as living entities, we are meant to be part of Krishna's superior energy. Actually, we are part of Krishna's superior energy. However, we are trapped in this marginal energy, which is in between the two, superior and inferior energies. Being conditioned souls, due to our material desires, we are always trying to exploit the material nature, and therefore we are trapped in this material world as conditioned souls, in this embodiment, material embodiment. So even when we start to practice bhakti, there's always this attraction by the material energy. So in many of Prabhupada's books and purports, Prabhupada has referred to this as the tug of war, where even when we try to focus on the spiritual energy, on bhakti, the material energy tries to attract us towards it. So it is a tug of war. Then in 7.4, Krishna has stated, Bhumi Apanalo Vayu Kamano Buddhi Evacha, Ankara Ityami Binna Prakriti Asura, regarding his material energies: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All together, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. So those are the 3 types of energies of the supreme absolute truth. Now, regarding, so we have seen the various, actually in the beginning we saw regarding the relative truths in the material world, and then we also saw why it is important to realize the absolute truth. Then we saw the features of the absolute truth and why Bhagavan realization is the most complete feature. Then we saw regarding the energies of the supreme absolute truth. Now we shall see regarding the opulences of Bhagavan. As described by Parasara Muni, Bhagavan is the one who has all these 6 opulences: wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, renunciation, in unlimited quantity. In this material world, it is very rare to find people who have at least 2 opulences in unlimited quantities. However, Bhagavan is the one who has all 6 opulences in unlimited quantity. So regarding the opulence of wealth, we know that after leaving Vrindavan, Krishna became Dwarkadish, the king of Dwarka, after liberating his parents. So as the king of Dwarka, we can see in chapter 69 and chapter 80 of the 10th canto or the Krishna book. In chapter 69, there are descriptions about how when Narada Muni visited the city of Dwaraka, he could see the opulence of wealth in the city with so many palaces of Krishna. And even in chapter 80, there's this beautiful pastime of Sudama, where this poor Brahman Sudama approaches Krishna for help. Actually, he doesn't say that he needs financial help, though he was sent there by his wife. Then in that pastime, we can see that Krishna bestows material wealth to Sudama, his old friend. So that is the difference between the supreme person and the so-called wealthy people in this material world. We know of so many wealthy people in this material world, but we cannot even find one person who will help his old poor friend. Have we come across any stories regarding the richest, some of the richest people in the world who also helped their old poor friends to become millionaires? No. So that is the difference between the supreme person and the so-called wealthy people in the material world. Then there's also this beautiful Golden Lila pastime, where Krishna displays his opulence of strength by holding the golden hill. Even as a small boy, he exhibited unlimited strength. So there are many unscrupulous persons who claim to be avatars of Krishna, or this avatar and that avatar. So these are also ways to judge them. We can actually see whether they satisfy these 6 opulences. Then regarding the opulence of beauty, Krishna as Shyam Sundar with his dark complexion, he is the only one who remains to be all attractive, even with the dark complexion. That is the opulence of his beauty. Then regarding his fame, even as a cowherd boy, of all the pastimes in throughout Krishna's life, his pastimes as the cowherd boy remains the most famous and something which is dearest to the heart of all devotees. Then regarding the opulence of knowledge, Krishna delivered the Gita to Arjuna. And regarding opulence of renunciation, we know that Krishna agreed to become Parthasarathi, and that shows his renunciation. Despite the fact that he had all the other 5 opulences, the most important thing is his opulence of renunciation, where he was willing to serve his devotee as the charioteer. So that is the 6th opulence. Even if we find anyone in the material world with all 5 opulences, it is very rare to find someone who has this 6th opulence of renunciation. Only Krishna has it. So okay, can we have a short break? We still have quite a lot to go. So just a 5 minutes break. Hello.
Yes, okay, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. Can you continue? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, thank you. So just a quick recap. So in the beginning, we saw regarding relative truths, and then the regarding the absolute truth, the three features of the absolute truth. Then regarding the supreme absolute truth and its energies. And we also just saw a section regarding the opulences of Bhagavan. So from after knowing that Bhagavan realization is the topmost and complete realization, so we know that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and we also saw that based on the aspect of the six opulences. Now, in this second half, we're also going to look at several other aspects which further prove why Krishna is regarded as the supreme personality of Godhead. So now regarding the qualities of Krishna, in Nectar of Devotion, actually Nectar of Devotion is a summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami. He has mentioned 64 prominent qualities of Krishna. According to him, there are 64 prominent qualities which are exhibited by the Swayam Rupa of Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. He has actually, Krishna has innumerable qualities, out of which these 64 are prominent. And if we compare the other tattvas like Vishnu Tattva, Shiva Tattva, and Jiva Tattvas, we shall see from here how the other tattvas are different from Krishna and how Krishna is actually the topmost. So the first 50 qualities are given in actually, if we look at the Nectar of Devotion, we can find these qualities in chapter 21 and chapter 22 of Nectar of Devotion. It's also accessible in Vedabase. So these are the 50 qualities. Actually, these 50 qualities are also there with Krishna. And however, regarding Jiva Tattvas can attain at most these 50 qualities. Krishna has even more, up to 64, but Jiva Tattvas can only attain 50, up to 50. So as we know, Brahma is the topmost living entity, meaning the topmost Jiva Tattva. And under Brahma, there are other Devatas like Indra, Chandra. So even those Jiva Tattvas can attain up to 50 qualities. So even if we can try to be Brahma by developing these 50 qualities. However, we know that it's a futile attempt, because it's mentioned in the Gita itself, like even if we get promoted to Brahmaloka, after being promoted to the higher planets, we still have to, we get to enjoy there for a while, and then we still have to return to this material world. It all depends whether we choose to enjoy or not. If we choose to continue our Krishna consciousness, even in the higher planets, then we could be promoted to the spiritual world. However, if we enjoy in the heavenly planets, the piety expires and will be forced back into this middle planet. So that's a futile attempt. Now regarding Shiva Tattva, Lord Shiva has 5 additional qualities. So he has 5 more than the Jiva Tattvas, meaning 55 in total. So Shiva Tattva is actually between the Jiva Tattvas and the Vishnu Tattvas. Shiva has up to 55 qualities with these 5 additional qualities with the 50 which we saw earlier. Then Vishnu Tattvas have 5 more than Shiva Tattva. So meaning Vishnu Tattvas have 60 qualities in total. The Vishnu Tattva refers to the Narayana feature, which is there in the Vaikuntha planets, the 400 form. So those Vishnu Tattvas have these 60 qualities. However, we say that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, like even above the Vishnu Tattva because Krishna is the source of Vishnu Tattva. And therefore, Krishna has 4 additional qualities compared to the Vishnu Tattvas. So there's always this misconception where people say that Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu. So those are actually due to lack of knowledge regarding these qualities of Krishna. And as we shall see later, there is a huge difference between Krishna's expansions and his incarnations. So that also we shall see later. So Krishna has these 4 additional qualities, even more than Vishnu Tattvas. So that's why Krishna is there in Goloka Vrindavan, which is even above the Vaikuntha planets, where the topmost entity is the Vishnu Tattva or Narayana. So Krishna's Goloka is even above the Vaikuntha planets because he has 4 additional qualities compared to Vishnu Tattvas. So this is how we can summarize the different Tattvas based on their qualities. Krishna has 64 out of 64. Actually, Krishna has innumerable qualities, out of which the 64 are prominent, and he has all 64 qualities in full. Vishnu Tattvas have 60 out of 64, roughly 94%. Shiva Tattva got 55 out of 64, 86%. And Jiva Tattvas have 50 out of 64, roughly 78%. All the Jivas, even Brahma, can only attempt to achieve up to 78% of the 64 qualities. So when we say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is not out of blind faith. It is all established in the scriptures, and we can see how all the different tattvas are related to Krishna, in the sense that all the different tattvas are parts and parcels of Krishna. So by saying that Krishna is the Supreme Person, it does not mean disrespect to others. When we say Krishna is the Supreme Person, it doesn't mean that we are disrespecting Vishnu or Shiva or Brahma, because they are all part and parcel of Krishna. So that's what Narada Muni has clearly explained in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam. This is the point where he gives instructions to the Prachetas. In canto 4, chapter 31, verse 14, Narada Muni says, Yata tarur mula nisechanena tripyanti tatsanda bujopashaka pranopahara chaitendriyanam tataiva sarvaranam achyutejya. As pouring water on the root of a tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, and as supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and limbs of the body, simply worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service automatically satisfies the devatas who are parts of that Supreme Personality. So we know that whenever we water a tree or plant, we pour water to the roots. So it is not very wise to pour water to the leaves, because we know that the entire plant gets nourished simply by watering the root. That's what the Narada Muni says here. Simply by worshipping Achyuta or Krishna, all the other devatas are automatically satisfied. So that would be the wisest thing to do, rather than watering the leaves, as per Narada Muni's instructions. Then in canto 12 also, there's this beautiful verse in the last canto of Bhagavatam, the last chapter, verse 16. Actually, the last chapter of Bhagavatam talks about the glories of Bhagavatam to establish why it is the topmost Purana of all the other Puranas. Nimnaganam yata Ganga, Devanam Achito yata, Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu, Purananam idam tata. Just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta, the supreme among deities, and Lord Shambhu, Shiva, the greatest of Vaishnavas, so Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. So we saw the relationship between Krishna, Vishnu Tattva, Shiva Tattva, and Jiva Tattvas. So we clearly saw how Krishna has been established as the Supreme Person in with a lot of evidences from the scriptures. However, just by saying Krishna is the Supreme Person, that does not mean disrespect to others, because even in Bhagavatam, it is clearly stated, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. Lord Shiva is the greatest of Vaishnavas. Therefore, he is also worthy of respect. Just like how we all know that Vaishnava Aparadh is a very serious offense. Therefore, though we regard Krishna as the Supreme Person, it is also important to respect all his parts and parcels, especially the Supreme Vaishnava, who is Lord Shiva. However, it is also worth noting that Narada Muni has given us the shortcut to respect and satisfy everyone simply by worshipping Krishna. Then, apart from Gita and Bhagavatam, in other scriptures like Brahma Samhita also, it is stated, Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. As we saw in the previous Venn diagram. So from this diagram, we can clearly understand how Krishna is the origin of all. From Krishna come all the Vishnu Tattvas, then Shiva Tattva and Jiva Tattvas. So even in Brahma Samhita, when Lord Brahma utters his prayers, those are all based on evidences of how Krishna is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. Then in Brahma Samhita also, 5.39, I worship Govinda, the primal Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna, and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Narasimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portions. So we shall also see later, in the next section, how Krishna is the Swayam Rupa, the original personality of Godhead, and how the others are avatars. That is also quite a huge topic. Then in 5.46, it's explained, this is regarding the notion of expansions. The light of one candle being communicated to other candles, although it burns separately in them, is the same in its quality. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who exhibits himself equally in the same overall manner in his various manifestations. So apart from this candle analogy, we can also think about this analogy of ghee lamps. So we know that in our temples, not just during our regular programs, even during festivals, even in during Damodar month, we try to light as many ghee lamps as possible. So in the temple, normally the ghee lamp is lighted from the altar's lamp. So that is like the original personality of Krishna. The altar lamp is like the original personality, and the various ghee lamps, sometimes we even light up to hundreds or thousands of ghee lamps. So all those are plenary expansions, which also originate from the altar lamp. However, those ghee lamps are also equal in quality to the altar lamp. Still, the altar lamp has its special position. So that is the original personality of Godhead. And the expansions are, though they are equal in quality, they are still distinct from the original personality. So that is how all these expansions emerge from the Swayam Rupa of Krishna. So to understand that further, we can see that in Goloka, Krishna resides in Goloka in his Swayam Rupa. And from his Swayam Rupa, there are various other expansions. So in Goloka itself, there are three abodes: Goloka, Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwaraka. So in all these different abodes, there are different expansions from the original personality, Swayam Rupa of Krishna. So it is worth noting that the term used here is expansion, because we are looking at Goloka, which is part of the spiritual sky. So Krishna's expansions in the spiritual world itself, in Goloka itself, there are many other abodes like Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka. So there are various other different expansions like Swayam Prakasha, Tat Ekatma Rupa, and also the Chaturvyuhas. Then from this topmost abode, all these expansions become sources of other expansions at the lower levels. Like here in Vaikunta, the expansions, the Narayana expansions in Vaikunta derive their source from the upper level of Goloka. So the spark originates from there and it comes to Vaikunta. Then in Vaikunta also, we have in all the Vaikunta planets, Krishna is there in his Narayana form, the four-handed form. Then through the Dvitiya Chaturvyuha, the secondary Chaturvyuha, there are further expansions to all the other innumerable Vaikunta planets. So the spark from Goloka comes to Vaikunta to create many other further expansions for all the other innumerable Vaikunta planets, where Krishna is there in his Narayana form. Then from there, we come to the avatars of Krishna in the material world. Here also the spark comes from Vaikunta. From the Dvitiya Chaturvyuha, the spark enters the material world to create the Purusha avatars and all the other different categories of avatars. So it is worth noting here that the term avatar is used at this point. Previously, we saw the term expansion. So if we, for those who have noticed, in almost all of Prabhupada's purports and all his other books, he always uses the word expansion when referring to the various plenary expansions. However, if we look at the first canto of Bhagavatam, chapter 3 of the first canto, it is titled, Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Prabhupada always uses the word expansion, but only in chapter 3, he uses the title incarnations. So can anyone answer why? Hello? Anyone? Okay. The reason is because expansions deal with the spiritual world. As we saw earlier, in Goloka and Vaikunta, they are part of the spiritual world, and therefore the term expansion is used. But when it comes to the material world, starting from the Purusha avatar, for all the 6 categories of avatars, the term avatar is used because the meaning of avatar is descending from the spiritual world to the material world. So when the spark arrives at the material world, the term avatar is used to denote the descent. So that's why in the first canto of Bhagavatam, chapter 3, it is titled, Krishna is the source of all incarnations. In chapter 3, as we know, up to verse 28, there are various incarnations which have been explained in the chapter. So all those are incarnations or avatars which deal with the material world. All those expansions actually descended to the material world. That's why we have all these 6 categories of avatars, starting from the Purusha avatar. And then all the avatars are explained in chapter 3. So that is the difference between expansion and incarnation. So a lot of misconceptions regarding this Krishna being an incarnation or avatar of Vishnu, all these misconceptions happen because of lack of understanding about the difference between expansion and incarnation. So incarnation or avatars are referring to those which descended to the material world from the spiritual world. So there are 6 categories of avatars, beginning with the Purusha avatar. So for those who have attended Paditataran Prabhu's classes, it's very easy to explain about the Purusha avatars, the entire process. He has explained it many times. So then we also have Guna avatars, where Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, they all represent different gunas. Then the Leela avatars, these are all the different avatars explained in the 27 verses of chapter 3 of the first canto. Then regarding Manvantar avatar, these refer to the Manus who reign during each day of Brahma. We know that Brahma's every day of Brahma consists of 1,000 Chatur Yugas, or every Chatur Yuga is actually a cycle of the 4 Yugas. So there are 1,000 Chatur Yugas, and out of those 1,000, for each of those 1,000 Chatur Yugas, for every 71 Chatur Yuga, 1 Manu reigns. So there are 14 Manus in every day of Brahma. So those are the Manvantara avatars. Then we also have a Shakti Avesha avatar, which can be direct like the Shesha avatar, or indirect like Narada or even Vyasadev. And regarding the Yuga avatars, these are associated to the color of the incarnation in different yugas. Like during Satya Yuga, the color of the incarnation is white. Then green in Treta Yuga. In Dwapara Yuga is the dark complexion like Krishna. Then in Kali Yuga, it's yellow or gold like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we also know that in the third canto, the third chapter of the first canto, it is the first 27 verses deal with the various incarnations of Krishna. However, in verse 28, it is stated, Iti cham sakala pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. All the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord, but Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. So as we saw earlier regarding the expansions from Goloka to Vaikuntha to the material world, so when the spark reaches the material world, the avatars emanate. So there are 6 categories of avatars. So this verse clearly states that the avatar of Krishna who descended to the material world is actually the Swayam Rupa of Krishna, who is there in his original form in Goloka. So that is the main message behind this verse. So there's no such thing like Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu. So if we clearly understand the difference between the expansion and incarnations, it's very easy to understand this verse also, why they say Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. Because Vasudeva Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, who descended to the material world, is the same as Krishna in his Swayam Rupa in Goloka. That is the main message behind this verse, where they say Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. So regarding the incarnations, we now know that avatars or incarnations refer to the form of the Lord, which expansions of the Lord which descend to the material world. So in Gita 4.8, Krishna has clearly stated why he descends to the material world. He has his to-do list with 3 items: Paritranaya Salanam, Vinashaya Chaduskriram, Dharma Samsthapanataya, Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. There are 3 main items: to deliver the pious, to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion. So there are 3 items in his to-do list, of which the topmost item is to deliver the pious. So clearly, based on Krishna's words, he himself establishes that devotees are the top priority for him. For him, love for his devotees is topmost, and therefore we should also focus on Krishna as our topmost priority, so that we can go to Goloka, back to Godhead. So in conclusion, I just want to convey that we have seen various aspects, starting from the difference between relative truth and absolute truth. Then we saw the different features of absolute truth and why Bhagavan realization is the most complete and topmost, and why Krishna with his opulences is regarded as Bhagavan. Then we also saw the different qualities of Krishna, how he is related to the other tattvas, how the other tattvas like Jiva Tattva, Shiva Tattva, and Vishnu Tattvas are part and parcel of Krishna. And then we also saw the difference between expansions and incarnations. So all these established why Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is not based on blind belief or sentiment or fanaticism. So there are more than enough Shastric Praman to establish the supreme absolute truth, Param Satyam. Only if all our Sanatani brothers and sisters focus on studying scriptures rather than trying to learn about Hinduism by watching serials or reading WhatsApp boards, so they will also realize the truth based on Shastric Praman. So let us hope that people will start to take this study of scripture seriously to understand the supreme absolute truth. And that's all from me for today. And thanks for attending this session. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. So any questions or comments? Hello, you can unmute. Yeah.
Hello. So far, very good. I can understand very well, Prabhu. Very nice, Prabhu.
Okay,
you.
so I hope that all our devotees can convey to people from other sects, like maybe just to explain to them that when we say that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so we can actually convey the evidences from scriptures. So just to prove that we are not being fanatic or what, we are just following the scriptures. So anything else? Yes. Okay, so can I end the meeting now?
Okay. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.